First off, welcome to Dose of Togetherness with Teresa Young, Stephanie Rivers, and Latoya Cooper. My name is Derek Hosberg, and I'm the program director at Reimagine. And as a nonprofit, we spark community experiences like this one that empower individuals, families, and communities to face the hardest parts of our existence, including illness and death, while inspiring people to celebrate life and one another. So thank you all for joining. Brad is actually away, so that is why he's not, who's our founder and executive director, and that's why I'm leading or hosting the session today. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you all know that this presentation is made possible with the support from the National End of Life Doula Alliance, an inclusive nonprofit membership organization seeking to inspire positive creative change in American death practices that lead to meaningful end-of-life experiences for people of all races and diverse backgrounds. So thank you so much, National End of Life Doula Alliance. And I also wanted just to highlight our other festival sponsors that, we have profound gratitude, and we thank these sponsors who support Reimagine and make all of this work possible. And the last thing, and I meant to switch the photo because this is more awkward looking at myself, but before introducing Teresa for the guided meditation, I just want to make sure everybody knows how Zoom works. Basically, there's a little microphone in the left-hand corner where you can turn on and off your mic. There's also a camera where you can turn it on or off, and we highly recommend that you keep your camera on if possible, as it makes us all feel a bit closer to each other, especially when you go into the breakout rooms. If you have any comments, please feel free, or questions for me, to put them in the chat. If you're running into any technical issues, I will try to support you as much as possible. If you're finding the chat to be distracting, in the top right corner, you can click that little arrow and close it. I'd also like to mention, for those people who are calling in today, that when you are in the breakout rooms, you can click *6 to unmute yourself. And with that, I would like to introduce my wonderful colleague, Teresa Young, who works with me on the programming team. And alongside her professional work, she's dived deeply into the contemplative space, sitting over 1,000 hours of silent Vipassana meditation and becoming a yoga and breathwork teacher. And she's really committed to bringing wellness resources to the masses by running a 3,000-person online community, offering 40 events a week, teaching weekly yoga classes, and hosting healing retreats. So for those who have been to other doses with Teresa, you're all in for a wonderful treat. So with that, I'll pass it off to her.
Thank you so much, Dara. It's always so nice to join this community. Really, really nice dose. So today we're going to be doing a little guided breath meditation. So we'll just dive right on into it. Go ahead and just find yourself in whatever comfortable seat or position that's going to feel good for the next 5 minutes. So you can just allow yourself to go there. It's kind of important when we start to almost to set that intention to be like, okay, I can let myself drop in, explore, and be curious, and kind of see what all that wants to be revealed today. So start bringing our attention inwards. If it feels good, you can start to close your eyes. It helps to kind of remove the outer sensations that might be continually detracting ourselves outwards. And just start feeling the rise and fall of your chest with each breath. Each inhale, your belly's filling with air, and then with each exhale, really almost using your abdominal muscles to help press that air out. So inhale, filling the lungs nice and deep. And then exhale, really emptying out. And just start allowing your inhales and exhales to start to even out to be the same length. So even just this practice of bringing awareness to your breathing kind of starts to bring you inwards. And with this first cycle of 5 breaths of just even inhales and exhales, we're going to use our breath to sweep up and down our body. So using the breath to really either maybe inhale, going from the feet, up through the legs, traveling up the spine, and then out through the crown. And then as you exhale, bringing that down through the crown, down the spine, tailbone, legs, and then connecting down the feet and into the earth. And just allowing yourselves to use the breath to create spaciousness and awareness in the body. That as you sweep, you can feel and sense any sensations, any feelings or emotions that are sitting there. As you move through your body, perhaps stopping at any place that might be asking for a little bit more attention today. And giving yourself this moment, allow yourself to take this pause and bring this curiosity and say, what's there? Maybe it's feeling it in the back of your shoulders. Maybe it's feeling it in your jaw, maybe in your throat. Maybe you feel some heaviness in the heart. So just taking a moment to just create spaciousness to really allow that that's there. This last cycle of this round, taking that breath in, sweeping it through the body, and then exhale, emptying it out. And with these next cycle of 5 breaths, what we'll do is as we inhale upwards to the top, we're going to hold at the top of the inhale for 3 seconds. And then after you hold at the top for 3 seconds, you're going to exhale all the way out and then hold at the bottom of the exhale for 3 seconds. So go ahead and start doing that. Inhaling, breathing in all of this potency of this very present moment. Holding it at the top. And then exhale, allow that breath and awareness to exhale out and expand out into this infinite, entire infinite of this now moment. Really feeling the whole possibility of everything that exists in now. Inhale, breathing in everything that's happening in our lives, everything that's currently happening in the world, this current moment. And then exhale again, expanding your awareness all the way out into this, all of the potential, all of the opportunity where all futures are possible, holding at the bottom of the exhale. Inhale, breathing in again, all that possibility, feeling the potential of all the next conversation, connection, holding at the top. And then exhale everything again, breathing out into the future that we want to create, breathing out into the future that we want to see, holding at the bottom of the exhale. One last cycle. Inhale, breathing in, maybe seeing all of those difficult yet super important conversations that we have in this life, holding at the top of the inhale. And then exhale, breathing out, seeing ourselves and our loved ones with all the strength, holding all the strength to move through everything we need to move through. Holding at the bottom, holding a little longer, and a little longer. And then inhale in, returning the breath back to normal. And just taking these last couple of breaths in to even everything out, clearing the body, and feeling the power of our own individual beings, our own potential, the willpower that exists in each and every one of our cells, each and every one of our breaths, and each and every one of our bodies. Slowly starting to come back, sensing your body, sensing this now, space and time, and each other. Always wonderful to breathe with you. Thank you so much for joining me in that breath exercise. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I didn't realize how much I needed that. I think I was a little nervous. I realized I'm probably still a little bit nervous and hosting this, but that was, maybe I'm going to do better now. So thank you for that. So I'm about to introduce Stephanie and Latoya, but before then, I just wanted to give a little bit of background around how Reimagine has been thinking about what's happening and how we can respond as an organization. So Reimagine has always been dedicated to being a platform for underrepresented voices and also exposing the racism within the end-of-life care and in our healthcare systems in general. But we know we can do more. And since the murder of George Floyd, the staff at Reimagine has been having a lot of important and hard conversations about how Reimagine as an organization and a platform, and how each of us individually can take more of an active role in dismantling systemic racism. And these conversations have led to more conversations with people who are experts at facilitating discussions around racism, unconscious bias, and how leaders and organizations can do their part to tackle these issues. So the staff will be undergoing a series of trainings to support our inner work around this, as well as discussing how as an organization we can step up more. And we're also hosting a forum and training for our collaborators who are our event hosts on how they can step up too. And one of the biggest gifts for me personally in this process has been working closely with Stephanie, our Senior Development Director, in figuring this all out. And she has taken the lead in designing programming around this topic, starting with today's event. So now I'd like to introduce both of them. So Stephanie Rivers, who's our Senior Director of Development, is an accomplished musician, recording artist, and nonprofit management professional. Her 16-year career in philanthropy was spent with many notable organizations, including the Helen Keller International Organization and Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And she received a BA in communication as well as a certificate in fundraising leadership from Indiana University's Lilly School of Philanthropy. So as we at Reimagine are very lucky to have her too on. And LaToya Cooper, who is her very good friend, who is also known as the Songstress, is CEO of Music Meets the Boardroom, a successful self-sustained business, woman-owned, woman sought after by many music industry channels for expertise and fresh direct approach. And she's spent the past decade in the project management space and holds a master's of business administration. She is also an accomplished recording and touring artist, entrepreneurist, and has been featured on Essence.com. Stephanie and LaToya both grew up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma metro area, and will share their unique stories as it relates to death and dying in communities of color. So thank you, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you for that amazing introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. I want to start with a word from Mr. Langston Hughes before we get started. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the lands, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain. All the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. That was Let America Be America by Langston Hughes. I always like to start these things with a poem, especially from a person like Langston, who's an Oklahoma native and also one of our greatest African-American writers. Thank you to everybody for being here today. And thank you, Toya, for joining us. I want to just dive right in to have this conversation with Toya, who's been my friend now for what, 20 years, LaToya?
Yes, we started in the campaign world together.
That's right. We started as campaign operatives working for a congressman here in Oklahoma City in college. So we've seen a couple of things with regards to a lot of the struggles that we're seeing on television and reading in the papers these days. Before we get started, also, I want to talk about today, which is Juneteenth, and just acknowledge what this day means and why it's so significant to this discussion particularly. So June 19th, 1865 was the day when African Americans, enslaved African Americans, were told of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. Even though slavery had ended 2 years before, most slaves at that point did not know that it had. So we celebrate June 19th, 1865, because that's when we as a community officially adopted the day to celebrate the end of slavery. And I've heard a lot of comments recently from folks not knowing what Juneteenth was, not even knowing and not having any clue that this was a real holiday or a real date. So I hope that as Toya and I continue our discussion today, if you have any questions about Juneteenth or want to discuss it, that you definitely will put it in the chat, because this is definitely an opportunity for everybody to learn a little bit more about our nation's history as well as Black history. And so I encourage everybody to put questions in the chat if you have any questions about it or would like us to elaborate on it and how it relates to what we're talking about. So Toya, let me just kick off, because now I'm going to kick my shoes off and we're going to get comfortable here while we have this conversation. I just want to know from you right off, how have you processed all the current events and what's going on? How do you feel? Like, what is going on in your area? For everybody who doesn't know, Toya lives in Texas now. I'm broadcasting out of Oklahoma. So we may be seeing different things, but just want to know how you're feeling and what you're seeing right now.
Well, at first, honestly, I didn't know how to process my feelings. It took me some time to really figure out exactly what I was feeling. I knew I had all these emotions going on. I was trying to figure out, what do I do with them? What do I do? It really took me some time to think. And I'm glad I took the time to do that, because I didn't even realize that I wasn't really processing what was happening. Yeah. So how about yourself?
I'm still processing. Mm-hmm. I don't really have an answer for this right now. I don't think anyone in my family does. Friends, both Black and white and Latino, don't. It's almost unreal. Mm-hmm. COVID-19 was unreal. And then it became something of a bit of a nightmarish thought when the television is reporting that African Americans and people of color are disproportionately dying from it. Then it becomes not unreal, but just plain scary. And so it seems like every time a new cycle or new information comes, we're constantly processing. Mm-hmm. How about your family? Talk to me about your mom and your dad. Because I know that even with everything going on, they have their own thoughts about death and dying.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother conversation there. We're gonna get into that today. My parents and I have not really had a conversation about what's been going on the last couple of weeks. And it's not because we don't acknowledge it. I think we are still we're in survival mode. I mean, we stay in that space. So we're just kind of thinking of, okay, how do we process what's going on? We want to make sure we're okay and alive. And I constantly find myself checking on my parents and checking on my dad. And I've always kind of been really overprotective of my dad anyway. And we really haven't even had a chance as a family to even talk about what's really going on, besides just trying to stay safe and try to just have some peace of mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know we talk about this all the time, but is that really such a different dynamic? Whether there was COVID or whether we were having a revolution, would that be so different? Do we talk about death at home that much?
You're right. And I don't want to say it's our normal. It's, you know what I mean? Like, we're in that survival mode and we see what's happening, we see what we're dealing with, but once again, we take it and we're like, okay, how do we prepare for as a family? How do we move forward and get through our day as a family? And I think part of it is because beside from COVID, really what we're kind of seeing is no different than what we've seen growing up. And so it's just been escalated in the forefront. So it's on a greater scale. It's, you know, it's still emotionally overwhelming. But yes, I mean, just over this past week in preparation for today, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't even had this conversation. We haven't stopped to think about this, or we talk about it a little bit and then we're on to something else in regards to, do you have enough food? Dad, are you in the house by 7 o'clock? Close your blinds. I mean, like, those are the type of conversations we're having. So, and we don't even really realize why we're having them.
That's deep. And so why do you think you're having them? Is it fear from just what's going on outside? And if we had more of these conversations about what would happen if we died, you know, is it just fear from just not having those conversations and just not understanding what the next steps are? You know, where does that come from?
Part of it growing up in Oklahoma, part of it.
For sure,
you know,
that.
you grow up and you learn, you know, these different things to survive. You know, survive. It's just what we do. I mean, I compare it to, for example, being a woman. You went to Walmart, you've bought all these items, you're walking out to your car. What's the first couple of things that you do when you're walking to your car? You're looking around, making sure no one's following you. You have your purse under your shoulder and you have your keys out before you get to the car. You don't really think about, it's just conditioned. It's just what we do as women to stay safe every day. We don't go home and necessarily talk about the fact that we did those things, but it's just innate at some point. So yeah.
Let's jump back. Let's talk about survival and living in Oklahoma, because I particularly, you know, my mother is a hospice nurse, as you know, and so, you know, death was always present in our space. It was never a conversation we were afraid of having. I realized that was not the case in other people's families. But we didn't prepare. We didn't prepare for any of that, even though, you know, especially being one of the few Black families in certain communities in Oklahoma, you didn't know what to expect or what to happen or how to have these conversations. And so we probably should have been, you know, just the same concept of going in your house and making sure your doors are locked and everything is good. But let's talk about growing up here and what that means and what that looks like as Black women who were surviving. And then in that survival, we're not talking about preparing for death. We're not having any conversations there. We're just trying to get from point A to point B, from this to that, from high school to college, from college to the world, from the world to pay our bills, to maybe buy a house and be successful like everyone else. And then so often we just die and we aren't ready for it. We don't even have a life insurance policy. What's it like in the conversations in your family about that? Like, what was it for you? Because I know we talked about this many times, very similar stories.
Right. Just like your family, we just started to have the conversation of death and dying, preparing for death within the last year, I would say, last year-ish. And it took some time to get there. I remember having a conversation with my dad about a will. And he told me he didn't have one for the family. And I said, you know, Dad, we all need to make sure that we have a will and some other things in place as well. And it took me several years of going back and forth with my dad for him to actually do that. And so I don't know if was his personal, you know, struggle to get to that point of just acknowledging the fact that we all die, you know what I mean? Or if it's something deeper than that, you know? I mean, for your family, you talked about death, but you didn't prepare. So what was that? Was that kind of the same dynamics there?
We did, I mean, we're pretty much the same. I mean, I think my parents are probably a little bit more prepared than most, but I'm often wondering why others aren't. I certainly, as part of my time here at Reimagine, feel a great deal more prepared. I definitely have learned so much more about how to do this process and how to talk about this process with my family than I ever have before. We have so many resources and events that can help people have these conversations. So it's been a lot easier. Um, but I think the conversation fades out until moments like this in society when we're struggling and when there is, you know, race-based violence against individuals, violence from the police. We start to think about this again in a way that when we've just put it out of our heads because we're in survival mode all the time, right?
Right.
So Toya, talk to me. I'm just curious about just what you think about what's happened today, and if you could say anything to some of our peers out there and individuals who are protesting and trying to make the world a better place through these protests, so that Black and brown people can all have a much better experience living leading up to their death. Like what would you say to them in terms of just inspiration and what you would recommend they start doing
Yeah.
as a next step after this after the protest has ended?
Well, part of my processing, one thing that came to mind is, where is my place in change? What can I contribute? What can I offer? And I think that's a great question for anyone who is passionate about seeing a better tomorrow. What can you offer? What can you contribute? And one thing that I love to do is I love to teach. That is the thing that I realize is part of my calling, is I should be teaching. And so I'm doing that. But I am teaching people a lot of what we've talked about today. You know, the important creatives, especially creatives, having a will, having a trust fund, why you should do that, trademarking your stuff, copywriting your content, just making sure that they're building a legacy for themselves and their family and leaving something behind versus, like you said, leaving our family, we haven't prepared for anything. And our family is trying to get things together and trying to figure things out after we die versus while we're living. So that's where I'm showing up. And so anyone who is just passionate about doing something, find that calling and share it with people. Share it, because someone's going to take it and it's going to be passed on from generation to generation. And information is power, as we all know. Mm-hmm.
Amen, sister. Information is power. Information
Now,
is power.
I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Now,
go for it.
with your background, how are you helping your family now prepare for death?
I'm glad you asked that. You know, a lot of the Reimagine team knows that, you know, my mom has had a recent battle with cancer and she is doing wonderful. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. But before we went into surgery, we had some conversations. I asked her if her affairs were in order, if there was anything she needed. Did we need to talk about some things? Did my older sister have paperwork that she needed to have just in case something happened? And we, you know, I was surprised because I've been working with Reimagine for 8 or 9 months now. And I, you know, would have thought we would have had these conversations a little earlier, but again, it's often until something happens before you actually start having these conversations. So I think that it's a lot easier now. You know, I've talked to my dad. He does have a will. He's already bought a plot. So he's already ready to go. But I think we had to work up to that. We had to learn, you know, get to that space. I shared with Brad, our executive director at Reimagine, you know, a couple weekends ago that we said, it was a lot of the resources from Reimagine that really helped help me have those conversations and to know what to have conversations about. I mean, advanced care directives and, all of these things that I wasn't 100% knowledgeable about. My mom was somewhat knowledgeable about, but I mean, again, you don't really think about it until it gets to the stage where someone gets sick or someone dies unexpectedly or something. Right. So I think it's definitely something that we all need to have a discussion about in the Black household, and many households of color. Toya, how many times have we talked about getting to funerals of friends and family, and the families having no money to bury them, and they're asking for money at the funerals, and just before donations and things like that, just because we just as a community, we don't typically prepare, right? So I think this is an opportunity, and that's kind of what I want to say, is that what we're seeing on television, what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, is an opportunity for our communities of color to now not only start to look at the way that we live by demanding justice and a better life, but also the way that we die, because we are dying badly, disproportionately. And so in order to do that, we have to be open to having this conversation.
Right.
We have to be absolutely open.
And I agree with you. We have to be open because with my family, like I said, we started this last year having the conversation of death and dying, but it hasn't been easy. It has not been easy. Some people don't want to talk about it. The response will be like, "You're trying to put me in the ground." I'm like, "No, I'm not trying to put you in the ground. I'm just trying to figure out, if somebody goes, like, how do we pay for the house? Do you still have a mortgage? Do you, where are you going to be married?" I don't know these things, and it bothers me not to know these things, but like you said, just being open to the conversation, and also, how do we get more information out to people? That really is important as well. And with the conversations, it has been overwhelming for me because I'm almost 40 years old, and I'm a little embarrassed about the fact that I haven't had these conversations earlier. And some of the things that I'm discovering in these conversations, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we start at this point? You know what I mean? I feel behind, in some instances, but I've been trying to be proactive. One of the things that I've really wanted to lock down for my parents was long-term care. But I didn't find out about it until a few years ago. And by that time, my parents were in their 60s.
Oh, wow.
And I looked into it for them. I said, let me go and still look and see if I can get something for them. It was so costly that, I was like, how am I going to pay for this for them? At this point, I just have to figure out how I'm going to take care of them at this point.
Right.
But had I known about this type of resource, even 5-10 years ago, I would have locked it down for them a long time ago. But I didn't know. I didn't know until I heard someone else say that they had it for their parents. And I was like, what is that? And they started talking about it. And immediately I started looking into it. Like, I want that for my parents, so yeah. And then
absolutely
another conversation, I think, talking of death and dying with my dad, my family owns a lot of land. And I really want to see that land stay in our family. And so we got in the conversation of who's caring for the land, who owns what, and I've discovered so much of some things that haven't been done. And I'm like, it just breaks my heart. I'm struggling with that part.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to see my family lose that land. I don't want to see anybody selling things off because of, need for money and things like that. And understand how important it is to keep that land in the family. So, yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. That's a lot of conversation. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And for those of us who have families that do have things like land and property, which a lot of, Black families, Black and brown families, often don't have a lot of things to pass on to their families just because of their circumstances and how they're dying and when they're dying. It's really beautiful that you can actually have that conversation with your family. So let us know how we can help you do that. For sure. I want to
ask.
Yeah. I know Toya, we're kind of going to come to the end of our time before we do the breakout sessions, but I want to say, just from this conversation that we're having and all these points that we're touching on, this is setting us up, setting up a slate of events that Reimagine is going to be producing going forward with, as part of our festival and our ongoing programming. We would like to have, and we plan to have, many more events on a lot of the things that LaToya just touched on, for communities of color, to have these types of conversations within their groups, with a lot of our wonderful collaborators out there who are already doing this great work in these communities, and reach more of us and bring them into the fold of this conversation with Reimagine and the awesome team we have here with all these resources. So thank you for touching on a lot of those different pieces, because we're going to keep talking about this for weeks to come. So I want to stop us there at time and turn this back over to Dara for just a second to help us go into the breakout rooms. But Ms. Toya, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie,
for coming on. 20-year friendship, both went to the same university together. We've been singing together. We share band members. We share keyboards and a whole lot more. And been friends for just such a long time, and I value your friendship, and thank you for making time to come on today. And Toya is one of our collaborators at Reimagine, and so check out her events on the schedule. She's going to be doing some really great ones around the arts as well. So Dara, I'll flip it back over to you.
Thank you so much, LaToya and Stephanie. I personally really appreciated that conversation, and I think that was a beautiful way to kind of kick off this effort. And, you know, I already see notes of gratitude in the chat, but please keep them flowing. And so I'm going to put on the slideshow just to go over how our breakout rooms work. And I want to just say,
one of the breakout rooms. Yeah, totally.
Sorry, there's a little interruption. I wanted to say that just given the conversation in particular around race, that it is a sensitive conversation. So I hope that you will kind of follow some of the guidelines that we've outlined to hopefully create a safer space for people to connect with each other. So how the Togetherness circles work is that a moderator will be selected based on whoever is wearing the brightest shirt, but if you are and you don't want to, so I don't know if Stephanie or LaToya, if you want to share anything that came up during your groups at all. And we are gonna play a last song that Stephanie chose, but I don't know if there's any kind of parting words or thoughts, reflections.
I love those two young women. My mouth was open the entire time they were talking. I love them and bless them, and thank you so much. And you've opened up my eyes. I was talking in my breakout room. In Canada, in Toronto, we didn't have this to the degree. We didn't have it at all when I was a kid, but we certainly have not had it to the degree that you guys have it. It's really opened my eyes, and whatever I can do, I'm on board. So bless you both. Thank you very much for today. And of course, Dara.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Same thing with my group with Jean and Barbara. I learned so much in 10 minutes from them, and they both just brought me such joy, and just was the highlight of my day. And one thing that I found interesting about Barbara was that she marched in the 60s, and now she's marching again. So we just talked about her experience of, you know, you marched in the 60s and now you're marching again now, you know, how does that feel and things like that. And also Jean, she left us with just some insight of just finding peace through the process of death and dying. And she mentioned also that she is finding her personal voice, that everything that's happening is really giving her the strength to speak up for herself.
So in my room, I've heard three key words from my group, and it was urgency, opportunity, and learning. And collectively, this lovely group of women basically stressed those three key things as what they were receiving from today's dose. So I'm really, really grateful to them for some of the information they shared. Thank you, ladies, for being a part of this, and let's keep feeling urgency. Let's keep learning. Let's keep sharing, and let's keep going with it.
So my name is Val. I was in with two ladies who were, I was the only African American woman there. So they was really talking about, what they're learning, what they're doing. I think Monica was someone that I spoke with. She provided a website that's I have written down to have as a resource. I explained to them that I am an African American end-of-life doula, so I support my community with sitting beside people who are, at the end of life, at the bedside. It doesn't necessarily have to be Black Americans, but we do have different things that happen at the end of life, where if you're in a hospice facility and their main clients are white women, then they don't know what to do to serve the Black community. And then I also am an advanced care planning trainer, and I'm constantly talking about advanced care planning and helping my family prepare for the end of life.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll go. Our group, I'm going to try to make sure I get everybody's names. So I'm Kay, and we had Kathy, Tara, Zubin, Scott, and Rachel. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. I think I got everybody. Yeah. So we were sharing, and we kind of coalesced really nicely. We had different vantage points. Some of us were grieving the loss of family members more recently. Some a little bit further away, like parents and grandparents. Some people grieving the loss of life as it was prior to COVID. Some were concerned about the being on the front lines as nurses and working with people and fatigue and burnout. And how to make a difference as far as health disparities. So it was a very robust discussion, and I heard somebody say that 10 minutes went by really quickly, but I think that we established a group really quickly, and it was a nice communal exchange.
Looks like, I don't know if it's just me, but oh, okay, you're unfrozen. It was like frozen for just a second, but thank you for sharing that. I don't want to cut. Does anybody? I was going to. I know we're already at time, but I would love to play the last song. But if anybody, I'm personally really enjoying hearing all of your reflections. So if there's anybody else who would like to share something before we do the last song. Can unmute your mic if you want, or you can also write a note in the chat too while we listen to the song about what's come up for you today. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna play the last song, but I really hope the conversation continues in the chat as we go, and that you come back to the next dose to continue these conversations. I'll put some links in the chat that of upcoming events I recommend that you check out. And with that, I will figure out how to play this song. Okay. Hold on. Okay.
Trouble the water. I want. Why don't you let it be? Still water runs deep. Yes, it do. I know that. Oh yeah. Yes, it do. Yes, it do. Oh, yeah. You only believe when you're down, when you're on the street, when evening falls so high, I will comfort you. I'll take the part. Oh, when darkness comes, hey, Lord, you long around, just like a breeze over troubled water. I will lay me down, just like a breeze over troubled water. I will lay me down. Sail on, silver boat. Sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All of your dreams are on their way. See how they shine. Oh, and if you ever need, look around and say, I'll be there to lay me down, like a breeze over troubled water. I will lay me down. I'll be your breeze, yes, I will. Trouble the water. I don't want it alone. Why don't you let it be? Still water run deep. I know that. Yes, it do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still water. Trouble the water. Why don't you let it be? Talking about still water run deep. You'll be running. Yes, it is. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna be your friend. Yeah. Give it up. Why don't you let it be? Come on, come on.
Okay, I think I did it. I apologies that I heard. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Wait, where did that come from? Oh my gosh, it's like wait, are you guys hearing this?
Yes.
Oh wait, this is embarrassing. I don't know how, but